All right, so let's try this again. Hey, I'm Rick. This is your seat at the table. And I'm talking about Thieves Guilds Part 2. All right, this is going to be a different thing. So this is in part because I was watching a video that Bandits Keep put out on the topic, and it got me, thinking a lot of stuff. And I started to write some notes down, and then I'm just, like I said, I'm trying to kill another hour. It's just after 11 a.m. Nobody gets here before noon, and I can't do anything until they get here, and then it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes to do the job. And then I'm going home and wait for a plumber to come unclog my toilet. So when we talk about the concept of Thieves Guilds, there's something Bandit Keep fella brought out that really needs to be kind of pointed out or emphasized a bit more, I felt. And this is one of the reasons I got excited about the idea of doing my own versions of the video on the topic. And he said if you go to a small community, you're not likely to find an actual thieves guild. At best, you're going to find some bandits or some local thugs or things like this. And that's very true. Very true. Think about that for a moment. A thorp in D&D is like 20 people. You've got 2 or 3 houses, maybe 4 or 5 houses, somebody's barn. Maybe somebody's got a shed that they turned into a tap room where they're selling their own brew stuff to the other locals and passerbys. And then you get into the villages and towns and things like this. You get, in my opinion, if you have any kind of community of less than 1,000, you should not have an active thieves guild of any sort. You really need a city of 5,000 or more to really justify it. Because when you go individual by individual, a city with 1,000 people in it, that's still only a couple hundred houses. There's only going to be a handful of merchants, a handful of actually wealthy people. And so what does that mean? A handful of thieves. If you got enough people to get together to have an organization, you got a really rough community. Just pointing that logic out. So what do you do when you're dealing with this much smaller environments? You just, a lot of us will just discount the whole concept altogether. And I think that perhaps is a mistake. Perhaps, just perhaps, you should look at it from a neo-guild concept of what could eventually become a guild. So, which is funny, because while I was thinking about things to say about the video and what I was trying to jot down, I was driving from a previous job to get over here, and I thought, gee, there's a couple of characters from Mayberry. It's how old I am. I was watching these reruns when I was a kid. And the sheriff and Barney Fife run into these people, and they're not really evil people. They're just shady characters. And I can't think of the name of the family. They got a really, like all hillbilly families, that's what they were paired up to look like and act like was hillbillies. The daughter was a bombshell, and there was some chicanery going on, and I think Barney got tied up in it a little bit. And then, of course, the dad and the brothers came to town and have a shotgun wedding. And then one of the episodes that introduced these people. And then we go in and look at other frameworks. So you go in and there's Bill Ferny from Lord of the Rings. You go into Bree, and Bree is a modest-sized town. The innkeeper is probably the second or third most wealthiest person in the area. So it's not like there's enough there in the entire area of Bree to constitute the needs or the support for any kind of serious guild, let alone a thieves guild. It's just not going to happen. But you always got those shady character types that would be the local thief if they can get away with it, or the local enforcer, or the local drunk who will beat you senseless for your last copper and feel bad about it the next day. There's always those people. And in some cases, those people will branch out to become local bandits. And yes, and you'll have a town that's being harassed by bandits. But they got they got a hideout somewhere up in the hills. And so you go in and from that perspective, it's not really a thieves guild. It's just a group of thugs that got together and decided to, turn to banditry to make a living. And for whatever reasons, good or bad, we're not here to discuss that part. But the point, though, when we look at the small town communities, there's always some shady characters, unless it's so tiny that it's cousin Fred over there, and everybody knows Fred's shady. So anybody from shady from out of town comes in and starts hanging out with Fred, everybody just makes assumptions because it's usually truth, right? So you have those people, and if your characters, especially if your resident quote rogue, operates in this region enough, perhaps, just perhaps, they know this Bill Ferny character or these hillbilly characters, these hillbilly parodies, like in Mayberry and 100 other TV series and movies. Yeah, maybe, just maybe, you're familiar with them. You might even be related to them somehow, or you've done business with them in the past, or Bill Ferny used to have was well-known safecracker, in his youth. Now he's retired and gets paid as a city servant for Bree to guard the gate and be an ass. All right, whatever works for you. Take that into account, that you can still utilize the concept of Thieves Guilds. And if you have a large enough kingdom, for example, and I go to Forgotten Realms a lot, so I look at Cormyr as number of major cities. Each city could have its own Thieves Guild, or there could be a country-wide Thieves Guild with multiple guild houses. So the connection is even larger. Now, in my wannabe Interstellar Frontiers games, one of my players, Shannon, was brilliant about how he utilized everything. So early on, one of his planetary encounter rolls and stuff was this the Mafia showing up, their version of the mob showing up, and it was actually heralded or supported and operated by a fellow named Crackbeak. That's right, Crackbeak. He actually had broken his beak because they're aviaries, and had a bunch of steel rivets and stuff holding it together, and he did it on purpose because it made him look more sinister and more oppressive to his goons. But eventually, over the years, through the storyline development of that particular of Shannon's house, Crackbeak actually became a solid member of the house without being in the house until later. And what I meant by that is, so after about 20 or so cycles, there was an incident with some off-world problems that came in, and this case it was a purity cult that was anything that wasn't human needed to die. That's what the cult basically believed. And when you have an entire house that's 90% aviary, i.e. birdmen, they don't take kindly to that sort of attitude. Anyway, the cult started to run an operation in the city and the surrounding countryside, and the House Intelligence Ministry was doing their level best to chase it down, but we're not having a lot of success. And we had an event roll showed up, and then Shannon says, "I want to interpret this a little different." I said, "Your house, you interpret these event rolls as you choose." So he chose to have the local thugs, the local, Crackbeak's crew, take umbrage with this off-world group nosing into their turf, and even more so because where the house lord goes, the house. So the house lord, Shannon's character, was very noble. He was very, don't get me wrong, he was not skullduggery was right up his alley too, but in this case, he decided that it was Crackbeak's crew that captures this bad guy and leaves him and drops him off at the colonial center for processing. And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, my guys can't find these people. So, but this event suggests that somebody does. So I'm going to have Crackbeak's mafia, his mob, do it." And then they're going to surrender the bad guy to the house authorities in the traditional sense of driving up in the middle of the night and throwing somebody out the back door of a vehicle, all thrust up with a note. for the Duke, or I think, no, it was for the Baron. For the Baron, love your citizens. And I thought, creative thinking, right? Creative thinking. So if you look at so we take this from to a different angle as well. And this is something that Bandit Keep also brought up. If you look at the early progression for a lot of the very first edition and basic and expert edition for the Thief specifically, at some point your Thief can build a keep of sorts, but that can have a lot of problems too. Or you can have a safe. I call it a safe house. You can have a hideout, and you could do that in any significant size city. You could probably do that in a minor city. I as a character, I've had 2 thieves back in the day that I played quite a long time. And one of them, when they hit 10th or 11th level, decided to create their version of a safe house. And a modest-sized town that was about 12, 15 miles outside of a larger city. And so the character invested in what was it I invested in? It wasn't the local tavern, because that was always, a local bakery. The local baker was having a lot of problems early on, and the characters, as part of their extended campaign, had actually saved the baker's wife and kid from something. And then later there was a situation where the bakery got robbed, and it was tax time, and they were in Dutch, and so the baker knew the players were in town, or no, they were in the city. So he traveled to the city and hunted down the players, specifically to talk to my rogue. Now, this was the GM running this stuff. And he says, we're having all this problem. Can you loan me some, coin, and et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the other party members were kind of, And I thought, you know what? Here's the deal. And so my character invested in the bakery as a silent partner, expecting to have 2 things. Always to have a private room available that's locked up when nobody else is there, and understanding nobody goes in and nobody goes out, and that I get a small, tiny percent of the revenue, and that the baker would bank that with a local money lender, and then once a year it would take 10% of what we banked and invested in the bakery to make it better and bigger, and etc. And that was my, quote, character's retirement plan. And it was a safe house, in which we had to tap at least one time before the campaign came to an end. And I don't remember why it ended. I just think things changed. That was a long time ago, and we were still in high school at the time, I believe. So high school changes a lot of stuff, and then when you get out of high school, everything changes. So when you look at the idea of the Thieves Guild, try to think of it in a broader sense. And the term Thieves Guild is probably a misnomer now. It still works depending on, you're doing sword and sorcery, it still works great for that genre. But anything after that, it starts to get a little misunderstood, would be my guess, or my best estimate. And as for the same thing, it's the small communities, the small towns. No, they're not going to have a formal Thieves Guild. But there might always be that family, there's always those Joneses that you got to keep an eye on. The Jones boys up again. What the Jones boys? Oh, it's the Jones girls over here this time. If you believe the stories that my uncles used to tell when I was younger, and most of them were still alive, and you listen to some of the responses of other people that grew up around them on the east side of Des Moines, they were not a gang, but they were a lot of them, right? There were 6 kids, or 7 kids, 4 boys, 3 girls. So the 4 boys, we're talking, they grew up in the 50s, with the T-shirts and wadded up cigarette packs in their shoulders, when their dad didn't catch them and whoop them for doing it. And, they're all sons of a preacher man. So that just adds to the flavor. And so there was, them Hilliard boys. Man, every now and then, most of those people are dead now, but there was a time, and they go, "You're, you're Mary's son? Oh, God help you! No wonder you're, no wonder you're fucked up." Just saying. The family had its own reputation, which was kind of bizarre because we had this uber Christian reputation as Bible thumpers. Literal Bible. We beat you with a thigh. My grandfather knocked a guy out. Damn near knocked him out. Knocked him on his backside with a Bible. My grandpa wasn't afraid to put somebody down. If you got stupid with Grandpa was 6'2", 200 plus pounds. When I knew him, he was he was one of the nicest guys you could ever want, but he didn't take crap. He wasn't, he was very pragmatic in a lot of ways. It's like when my cousin and I were playing around on a neighbor's combine, and my grandfather, he comes out and he goes, "Boys, you guys come over here. Come over. Put your hands up here on the edge of the truck." He pulls out this machete out of his truck, and we're all like, "What are you doing?" And Grandpa says, "We're just, you want to play around like that? We're gonna save everybody the time. Put your left hand out. You don't use your left hand. I'm just gonna cut your hand off now, so we can get you to the hospital and get it over with." Them kind of lessons stick in your head more so than lectures do. And Grandpa didn't mean it. Obviously, he would never do something like that. We didn't know that. And we weren't 100% sure he wouldn't do that. Because we've seen Grandpa do some other things that you would say, "Oh, you can't do that." Tell that to, he says, I'll reckon I'll be fine. Me and God have an understanding. Do you? Grandpa was really big at that sort of stuff. He could get the hardest core person to, decide they wanted to rethink their life. And he didn't have to use Jedi mind tricks to do it. So anyhow, it's just an idea. It's just look at these Thieves Guilds and the concepts of them from a broader, different perspective. Look at the more modern equivalents of what we would call a Thieves Guild today. They exist today. A lot of the, quote, drug cartels are what are they? What are the mafia mobs? Especially back in the 50s to the 70s when, since the 90s, they've been really reduced in their abilities and power. But what did they do? They had a lot of different interests, but they had codes that they went by and standards and they upheld those codes. And God help you if you went against the group or against the code. So, and as for the small towns, the small thorps and villages, there's always that Bill Fernie. And why not cultivate? If you happen to pass through the area semi-frequently, why not? Your group's rogue might make a contact that way. Now, if your group would not, they're too good to cavort with somebody of that low nature or that bad a reputation, fine, so be it. Then what ready-made, problem solve, for your group to solve on occasion. What would your group do if they were hanging outside of the Prancing Pony and watching, 4 hobbits and a local ranger, a pony loaded with stuff, head their way out the gate, and Bill Fernie's down there, screwing with them? Would you say something to Bill? Obviously Sam took care of him, flipping that at the apple and hitting him in the head. But, there's always possibilities. Always possibilities.